Welcome to Christparency, the channel where we tackle misconceptions and uncover the truth about Christianity. So, why would we even bother with Christianity? It's literally just a bunch of mumbo jumbo made up by desperate people in search for a purpose to life, right? Well, as it turns out, it really isn't as black and white as atheists and agnostics make it out to be. Believe it or not, but we actually have a reasoning as to why we know what we know, and I want to share that with you guys today. So, if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and share with a friend. That is the most important thing that you could do, and let's hop into it. So quickly here, I wanted to go over 5 different pieces of evidence, if you will, for God's existence. And these are just basic pieces of evidence that people use. You don't need a Christian to understand these, because these are all from like a logical standpoint. The first one would be the cosmological argument, which is basically everything that has ever been created has been created by someone. For example, a painting had an artist and food had a chef. And so with that logic, who created the universe, right? And that really only makes sense as it being God. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, it's just evolution that created everything. That doesn't make any sense, because evolution is a process, not a place of origin. So it doesn't really make much sense as to evolution. So we're back to the drawing board. The only logical conclusion would have to be God, right? Further to the point of the cosmological argument, we get to the design aspect of the universe. The universe was the only way that you can really say it, because it's really the only easy way to say it, is fine-tuned. Atheist or not, you have to acknowledge that the universe was made in a very particular way, or created, or whatever you want to believe, in a very particular way. And there are certain things that if they were off, the whole entire universe just wouldn't work. And it's just kind of, it's almost crazy to believe that it happened out of pure existence. A common argument I see against this is that, well, if it didn't happen, then we wouldn't be here. But that's not really considering the amount of luck it would have had to be. Practically impossible. The fact that we're even here would be impossible. Like, just looking at it from logical, like they like to get all logical until you actually look at the logical things that point towards God's existence, right? Next is objective morals. Now, not everybody believes there are objective morals because they don't want to believe that there are objective morals. You'll notice that whenever there's a debate going on about God's existence, it in some way, shape, or form always comes back to morals. Brought up no matter like what the context is, it's going to be brought up at some point. Logically, objective morals do exist. Why would we have all these laws preventing us from doing stuff that would be considered subjective, right? Like, we all have like a sense of right and wrong, like not to murder or whatever. Just pick your poison, pick whatever example you want. We all have that sense in us. Now, the reason what atheists say is they're like, well, they only have those objective morals because that's what society or whatever taught us. To be honest, I don't even get that argument. It's just stupid. I think they're just grasping at straws at that point. I really don't know what the point is, but most people would agree that there is objective morals. Most people would agree with that, and they're kind of going against what most people would say. It's just kind of weird in my opinion, but whatever. Because there are atheists who believe in objective morality, and at that point you got to ask, where does that morality come from? We believe that it's coming from God. And of course there is the historical evidence for Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not gonna go all into detail of it because this video is not about that. I could make a video on that if you guys wanted to in the future, but for now, know when I say that historical evidence does point towards the fact of not just Jesus Christ's life, but the fact that he was raised from the dead. And this is, out of all of the sections in this entire video, this is the one I would highly recommend looking up for yourself. And last but not least is personal experience. Like it or not, personal experience often does lead to encounters with God in some way or shape. And it's not a great argument or evidence for God because it's personal. So it's probably the best evidence to get you yourself to believe, but it's not gonna, most people are just gonna shrug it off like, oh, whatever, yeah, sure. I mean, I believe that this happened to you, but unless I actually have proof, which you won't actually have proof of it happening, it's not gonna happen, you know? Now, whether or not you believe in God, assuming that all I said was true, which I wouldn't recommend, I would recommend that you do the research for yourself. What role does faith play? If there's all this evidence, then why do people need faith? That is ultimately the point that I'm hoping to be able to make in this video, so please hear me out. Evidence is not absolute proof. That's a word that people often confuse, is evidence and proof. Evidence is facts that point towards a conclusion, and proof is evidence that proves that something happened or exists, or whatever you wanna say. Evidence is only it points towards to, proof is it is, which is where faith needs to fill in the blanks, right? So you got all of this evidence and you got all of this faith, and together it makes an actual like believing and knowing God exists, if that makes sense. They're kind of like, because by themselves they're just kind of like there, but together it forms the ultimate like team or combo or duo, whatever you want. Now, some people will lean more towards evidence or more towards faith, but the point I'm trying to make here is you can't have faith without evidence, because if there's no evidence towards a God existing, why even have faith? At that point it would be blind faith. But the reason it's not blind faith is because we actually have evidence, logical conclusions that God exists, right? So yippee, you have evidence, you know God's real. Now what? Exactly, right? Just believing that God exists isn't really gonna get you anywhere. There are plenty of people that believe God exists. In fact, there's plenty of people that believe God exists, and not only that, but believe all sorts of different things about him. Like, there's all sorts of different gods. They're all talking about the same God, but in different ways. And so it's like, it's not really the same God, right? Yeah, it's not super hard to believe in God. That is a big deal though. But it's also not, it's not just believing in God. You need faith to be able to have a personal relationship with him, and trust and like learn from them, right? Because if you believe God, the first thing that you should do is be like, okay, well, what should I do? You look it up or whatever. The only thing that I can tell you personally is read the Bible. That is the best thing that you can do for your relationship, and to pray. Those are the two main things that every new Christian should do. Pray to God and ask him what you should do, and then read the Bible also, because he can speak through to you through the Bible, because they are literally God's words. The next one, and this is probably the biggest one, is free will. Why do we have free will? That's a great philosophical question. And one thing that's kind of great about Christianity, just kind of a side tangent, is it answers a lot of those philosophical questions, which is just so, it's just so awesome, right? To have all these like hard questions, and the Christians over here like, ooh, I know, you know. Sorry, that was really cringe, I'm sorry. But yeah, everybody in the whole entire world can believe in God even, but still not to go to heaven because they don't have faith. Faith is the biggest part of Christianity. For spiritual growth, it's kind of important, because when you become a Christian, you have some faith, but you need to learn to have to have full faith in Jesus, to really pull you through that, for lack of a better word, level of, I guess, of uncertainty or whatever, because there's always going to be doubt, and well, obviously there's going to be doubt, because like I said, we only have evidence for God, we don't have proof, which is why we need faith, actually, because the stronger that your faith is, the more you can make it through adversity. And it's because of God that we make it through our troubles and our worries and all that, and God gives us our faith. So praise be to God. And last but not least, and I feel like this is a really important one, is that human minds are finite. We can't fully understand everything. If we fully understood everything, then with the brains that we currently have anyway, it'd just freaking explode. Or brain, whatever. Okay, I'm getting way too gory. The point I'm trying to make is, though, human brains are finite. We can only know so much in the grand scheme of things, or whatever. Because if our brains were infinite, we would be like God, because God's brain is infinite, because God is infinite, right? And so there's always gonna be some stuff about God that we don't fully understand, and that's why we need faith. We need faith to know and to trust that he gave us enough evidence to show us where to go, if that makes sense. We have to have faith that everything in the Bible has enough stuff and evidence or whatever to show us who God really is, right? Because if you just read the Bible and accept that as everything that God is, then you're clearly missing out on something. Because if you read the Bible and feel like you fully understand who God is, then you're kinda kicking yourself in the foot. Or is that the saying? I don't even know. The point is, we can never truly know everything about God, but that's okay, because if we did know everything about God, then where would there be room for faith? I came up with 3 different pieces of evidence that support the idea that atheists actually have more blind faith than Christianity does. And if you have any counter arguments to any of these, I would love to hear them in the comments, because it's always nice to have a helpful, fresh perspective. Be greatly appreciated. The first one is all this evidence that I brought to you at the beginning of this video. If you are an atheist, you have to look at every single piece of evidence that I brought. That wasn't, by the way, that wasn't even all the evidence for God. That was just a few hand-picked ones that I chose for the simplicity of this video. You have to acknowledge all of this evidence, and you have to reject it. You have to reject all of it. If there's a single piece of evidence that you acknowledge that, you know what, that makes sense, you can't be a true atheist. You have to reject every single piece of evidence for the existence of God or counter it in somehow, because why would you believe any of that stuff that goes against what you believe, right? The only problem with that is the evidence is really strong, so it's going to be kind of hard to disprove it without having to do some sort of word dancing. That's what I'm going to call it, word dancing, using words to basically get out of a situation. Which is, by the way, really annoying when people do that. Like, not just in this context, but in debates in general, when they use the limitations of the English vocabulary to kind of get out of a logical statement or argument, which honestly I see a lot of atheists doing, and honestly probably even Christians sometimes. Next is assuming that science will eventually explain everything. Atheists commonly say, if we don't understand something, it's because science is not advanced enough yet, and that we trust that someday in the future we will be able to get answers to all of these in time. If that's not an example of blind faith right there, I honestly don't know what is. They're putting their full entire faith into science that it's one day going to be strong enough to disprove Christianity, and I feel like that needs way more faith than a Christian does for God. You have all this evidence for God, and for science you have nothing, but it's okay, because I trust, I believe, I have faith that science will one day disprove it. That's a lot of faith right there. And finally, it's, well, let's be honest, there's nothing more first besides God than the origin of the universe. And atheists come up with all of these theories for the origins of the universe. I understand that they don't, science doesn't fully confirm the origin of the universe or whatever, which is why they're called theories. But a lot of atheists accept them as fact. And the reason they'll accept them as fact is because they'll accept any origin of the universe as fact as long as it's not God creating it. I feel like a lot of you will realize that they'll go out of their way to believe stuff that doesn't make completely much sense in order to go against God. What you'll notice about a lot of these theories is that, well, first of all, they're theories. You can't prove them. And no one was actually there for the origin of the universe except God, because he created it. But no one was actually there. So the fact that they believe and maybe even have faith that this is actually how the universe was created, not God, says a lot, because there's a lot less, because here's how I look at it. There's a lot of evidence for God, right? And if there's evidence for God and God exists, meaning God had to have created the universe. But there's not as much evidence for how the universe was created as there is for God's existence. And so you kind of have to look at it logically. There's more evidence for God creating the universe than any other explanation, which using that, you need way more faith. The basis of faith, I feel like, is in this context is trusting something despite it having less evidence than something else, right? So if you believe in something that has less evidence for it, then I would argue that you have more faith for that thing than if you were on the other side. Post-editing Jamin here, I just wanted to clarify real quick. When I'm using faith here, I mean blind faith. Atheists need more blind faith using the little evidence that they have, but Christians have more general faith, I would say. So while I'm making the argument here that atheists have more faith than Christianity or Christians, that's not what I mean. I mean they have more blind faith because you have more evidence for it and you still have faith to believe in it. Obviously it's so important for both sides, but you have to realize that there's gonna be more on one side than others. So in conclusion, no, Christianity is not just blind faith. There's plenty of evidence for God, and not only that, I would argue that atheists have more blind faith than Christianity has or ever will. Once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it got you to thinking. Please do research on your own. That's the most important thing that you could do. And I hope you guys all have a very blessed day.